Hey IQers, Jonathan Levinson here with your daily Excel tip. So in this session, we're going to continue our talk about pivot tables and additional functionality. So the first one, we kind of went through some of the basics, some of the cool things, at 10,000 feet. But let's move on to like adding and showing these totals. So you'll notice we have our rows by region and item, right? So we can go ahead and drill in. But we have these totals. Maybe we don't want them. Well, there's two ways. One, we can right click on that field and remove. Another way is to go up to the design ribbon once you're in there, and you can actually go to your grand totals and say, shut off everything. Whoops. Or show me a specific on rows only or the columns, right? So you have some flexibility there. That's how you kind of add and remove the various types of totals or grand totals. Another thing, and we didn't even go into this on the last session, but it's about filters within a pivot table. Let's say we have our filters here. You can see we have our region as in rows, but I really want to be able to filter from there. Well, there's two ways of doing it. One is I can pull this out and bring it up to the filters. But what you'll notice is it breaks it down now by item. So what you can see is we can still go and do our normal filters by our items, but I really want to look at it by and be able to filter by my region. Well, I can take my region, right, bring it back up. Now I have the ability to go in and choose individual regions, or I can actually go ahead and say, you know what, I really want to see the east and west. So you have that flexibility there. But again, what if you really did want to see it this way? This is the way that you were asked to make it, or this is the easiest way to analyze the data. Well, the cool thing is we're going to talk about adding slicers and timelines. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our analyze ribbon. And what you're going to see under the filters, we're going to get two options. So let's go ahead and add a slicer first. And it's going to say, what would you like to slice this by? Well, in our case, we wanted to look at the region. So I go ahead and hit OK. And now we have this really cool slicer that is interactive, right? Now, obviously, that's a spelling mistake. That should have been east, but that could be anything. We can look at central. I can hold down control and choose multiples. So this is a good way to quickly keep the data the way you want, but be able to use additional slicers. And then you can go ahead and cancel out and see all your data. So again, slicers are very cool. You do have some options on the way. It does look, you can align certain things, those types of settings. You also could name them and do some additional formatting and filtration and sorting. So again, let's go back into our pivot table, analyze, and let's look at the timeline. Now we have one date field, right, called the order date. So it's only showing us that one because it is a date format. I go ahead and hit OK. And now what you'll see is we have this pretty cool visual for the order dates. So we could scroll down and we see all periods, but I could start choosing specific periods of the year, and it's going to filter on that specific information. So that's pretty cool, right? I do want to also just show you, you can do it from up here, right? You're going to see all your dates. So you can kind of do some filtration here. But again, using these slicers and timelines, it's just much quicker to navigate through the pivot table data. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is conditional formatting, right? How do we quickly identify things that meet a specific criteria? So in this case, what we want to do is we want to see anything that has total sales less than $500. I'd like for it to display those issues, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my total anywhere in our total sales column, and I'm going to head up to our home ribbon into conditional formatting, and we're going to go ahead and highlight cells rules. And in this case, we want to look at less than, it should be less than or equal to, right? But whatever, I can put 501, that works. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. It gives you some options. And what when I hit OK, you're going to get this box here that says, well, what do you want to apply this formatting to, right? Right now, by default, it's going to say that one selected cell, but that's ridiculous. You're not going to go and give conditional formatting to every cell. So in this case, I want to look at all the cells showing total sales values for item and order date. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And when we go in and let's move some of this stuff around. When we start going into that data set, you'll start seeing where sales are less than $500. Now, again, we took it all the way down to the item, the date, and so on and so forth. So now that we have that conditional formatting that shows, sometimes you see this data, right? If there's no data, it actually is blank. Well, if you want to see zeros, you can actually right click anywhere in that pivot table and go to the pivot table options. And what you'll see is down on the format, see by default it says for empty cells, show nothing. Well, in this case, you know what? Go ahead and show me a zero. So now you can see that data is a little bit more clean and consistent. I utilize that basically every time, right? So again, all that conditional formatting is put into place. I can go in and manage that rule. We have I don't know why there's two. I must have been playing around with it. But this is the rule that we had that's putting into place, and it applies to this. So if I wanted to make a change, I could double click and say, you know what, it's not 500, it's, I don't know, 300. So once you go ahead and do that and you apply, then obviously the chart will refresh to the appropriate values. Okay, this one's, sorry guys, this one's going to be long and drawn out a little bit. It's a lot of stuff. The next thing that I think is super important is calculated fields. So I'm going to simplify this a little bit just for this purpose. So right now we want to see the items that are sold. We want to look at the total units, the cost, the total cost, and our total sales. Now, obviously, we can rename these, make this all formatted perfectly, but for this purpose, let's just go ahead with this data. So the first thing I wanted to show you is, well, you know what? I have our cost, right? And I know what it was sold for, but in my raw data, I don't have a gross profit filled out. Now, I can go to the data in the table or the range and update the pivot table to include that formula, but I just want to do it in here. So how can I do it? Well, once you're clicked on the pivot table and you head up to the analyze table, you're going to see this under calculations, fields, items, and sets. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and click on calculated field. So you're going to name the field. So in this case, we'll call it gross profit. And then the formula is, and you'll see all the fields on the bottom. So it's pretty simple, right? So we have our total sales minus our total cost. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. And what you'll notice is it automatically gets added to your pivot table. So again, go ahead and rename it going through the value field settings, but now you have a calculation that is not in your raw data, but is actually being driven within your pivot table. So that one's really cool. You can do tons of things in there. You can have multiples, different calculations. You can always go back to your calculated fields and click on the drop down and make any modifications that you may need. So there's that. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is calculated items, right? So we can see this row here. We have our binders, our desks, but what if we wanted to do something similar to like our performance groups inside of RQ, right? We can assign multiple products or product category trees to a group and then quickly report on them. So let's say we wanted to look at pens, pen sets, and pencils, and we're going to, where our KPI is actually writing materials. So how do we do that? So you'll notice if we click on the row, one of their rows, and we go back to our analyze table, when we go to our fields items, you're going to get this calculated item option now. So when we go ahead and hit OK, we're going to call this writing materials. And our formula, right, is pens plus 10 sets plus pencils. So now I'm going to go ahead and add this, hit OK, and now what you see is it actually took the totals, right, your cost and your sales and your GP and your units, and put them and lump sum them. So at this point, if I really didn't care about this, because I really just want to look at the whole number, I get a much bigger and quicker analysis of my data by lumping or grouping various items. This I had to do a lot of cuts in this. I hope you guys learned a lot. If anyone has any feedback, let me know. Be safe out there, and we will be chatting soon.